So we just learned that Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance will not run for re-election. What might that mean for the New York State criminal investigation into Donald Trump? What does it mean for the prospect of justice? Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So we learned today that Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance will not seek re-election. And that set off a whole bunch of questions about, well, what will happen with the criminal investigation his office is conducting into Donald Trump. So the only accurate answer to that question is we don't really know. But there are some pretty strong indicators about the direction in which that case is heading and likely will continue to head. But let's start with today's announcement about Cy Vance not seeking re-election. There's a writer at The New Yorker named Jane Mayer who broke this story at 6:15 a.m. in a tweet. Quote, Cyrus Vance Jr., the Manhattan DA leading the criminal investigation of Donald Trump, told his staff at 6 a.m. this morning he's not seeking another term, leaving the case in the hands of a yet-to-be-determined successor. Well, first of all, kudos to Ms. Mayer for breaking the story 15 minutes after Cy Vance announced to his staff today that he would not be seeking re-election. She also wrote and published today a really good deep dive article in The New Yorker into Cy Vance. It's titled, quote, Can Cyrus Vance Jr. nail Trump? Insiders say that the Manhattan District Attorney's investigation has dramatically intensified since the former president left office. So let's start with the positive. Let's then talk about the somewhat less positive, and then let's finish strong. Let's start with the positive. There are three important indicators, three important data points that this investigation is moving toward a criminal indictment of Donald Trump. And we've talked about these a little bit before. The first is that after not one but two trips to the United States Supreme Court, the prosecutors in New York finally got a hold of Donald Trump's financial information, his tax returns, and 8 years worth of financial documents from his accounting firm, Mazars. They received this information very recently, and they are now poring through it for evidence of potential financial crimes. That is data point number one. Data point number two, Cy Vance's office went out and hired an expert forensic accounting firm to assist them in going through the records and seeing whether criminal charges should be brought. Let me tell you, expert forensic accounting firms are really expensive, and I don't think Cy Vance would be spending New York taxpayer dollars to hire these forensic accounting firms unless he was moving toward an indictment. And then the third data point is that recently the Manhattan DA's office hired an expert former mob prosecutor, a guy named Mark Pomerantz, who used to work as the head of the criminal division at the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. Taken together, those three data points suggest that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is absolutely moving toward a criminal indictment of Donald Trump. Now, let's talk about the somewhat less positive. I think it's a fair question to ask, is in his 10 years as District Attorney in Manhattan, how aggressively has Cy Vance gone after, investigated Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, the Trump children, when there were some indicators that there was possible criminal activity? How aggressively, appropriately aggressively, did he go after Trump and company? And there is some reporting in Ms. Mayer's New Yorker article today that highlights and summarizes something that we have heard before that is, at a minimum, troubling. Here is how part of her New Yorker article reads. Notably, in 2012, Vance dropped a case involving two of Trump's children, Don Jr. and Ivanka, which centered on their management of the Trump Soho Hotel condominium in Lower Manhattan. And here's the concern, folks. Cy Vance overruled the recommendation from his career prosecutors in his office when they suggested going ahead with a criminal case against Don Jr. and Ivanka. It was learned that Cy Vance met with their lawyer, Mark Kasowitz, there's a familiar name, and after he met with the lawyer, that's when he overruled his prosecutor's recommendation to go forward, and he said, no, we're going to drop the case. Thereafter, Cy Vance accepted a campaign donation from Mark Kasowitz of $32,000. Here's how the New Yorker article summarizes that. Vance's opposition to charging the Trump children in the Soho case stirred scandal after a 2017 investigative report revealed that a few months after meeting with Mark Kasowitz, the lawyer for the Trumps, Vance told his prosecutors that he had overruled their recommendation to go ahead with the criminal case. And several months after Vance dropped the case, the report revealed he accepted a sizable donation from Kasowitz, and after that information was uncovered, Vance returned that donation of $32,000. Now, folks, I think we can all agree that that looks bad. That looks ugly. We don't know whether it was a product of corruption or it just looks ugly. And I wouldn't say that Cy Vance's 10 years as district attorney in Manhattan should be judged by that one incident. I will also say that as a prosecutor for 30 years, I know it's not easy to make prosecutorial decisions. I had to make them all the time. I got to make them completely independent of any political considerations or political pressure. And I know how hard those decisions can be. But here is a pet peeve of mine, if you'll indulge me one more minute, folks, and then we'll wrap up with what I'm hoping is the positive. You know, it always struck me as problematic that somebody could run for the office of district attorney or state's attorney or Commonwealth's attorney. And as part of their campaign, what do? They try to attract high dollar donors. They try to court, donors, I guess court is not a pun, is it? They try to attract high dollar donors who are rich, who are influential, who are powerful, who are connected, who are corporate. And then after they get elected, they may need to decide whether to criminally investigate and prosecute those same high dollar donors, the rich, the powerful, the connected, the influential, the corporate. Doesn't that feel like a recipe for disaster? They're certainly not getting money from the poor, the powerless, the disenfranchised. They're not getting big fat $32,000 campaigns from the poor folk in their jurisdiction. So maybe it's a little easier to decide to investigate and prosecute them. There's an inconsistency, an incongruity there, that you would accept big fat checks like $32,000 from the lawyers for Trump or from, people that you might then have to investigate and prosecute later. That's why having district attorneys who are elected instead of appointed, it's always felt a little off to me. Now, I'm not saying that appointed prosecutors are immune from political influence, but boy, elected district attorneys. Anyway, thank you for listening to my pet peeve. Let me just finish by saying this. You know, it may very well be that the fact that there's going to be a new district attorney because Cy Vance is not running for re-election will have no impact whatsoever on the course of the Trump investigation and hopefully eventual prosecution. I can tell you, I worked for 10 different U.S. attorneys when I was a prosecutor with the Department of Justice at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office. And my investigations, my prosecutions were not affected one whit by the fact that I had 10 different U.S. attorneys over the decades I worked there. And that's the way it should be, right? And hopefully that's the way it will be. If this investigation has been progressing honestly, ethically, and in accordance with the evidence, it should make no difference that Cy Vance will be the outgoing district attorney and a new district attorney will be elected. I would add as a footnote, given that one problematic investigation involving Donald Trump's children, it actually might not be a bad thing at all, that there will be a new district attorney who will take the reins of the Trump investigation. But one way or another, justice has to come to Donald Trump and his organization in the event crimes, financial crimes, can be proved. And do we think they can be proved? Yeah. Stay tuned, folks, because as we know, justice matters. Please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.